My name is Adrian. To the world, I was just a high-level assistant. But the truth? I was the ghost who built an empire from a rented office and a dying tech startup. For 7 years, I was the ghost in the machine. I stayed up for 72 hours straight to finalize the offshore logistics contracts that the board of directors called impossible. I rewrote Vance's speeches so he sounded like a visionary prodigy instead of a spoiled, incompetent heir to a dwindling trust fund. I engineered the hostile takeovers, mapped the supply chains, and designed the proprietary AI algorithms that made the Sterling Syndicate the most feared corporate entity on the eastern seaboard. I made him untouchable. And the night he officially became the youngest billionaire CEO in tech history, he handed me a glass of poisoned scotch. The betrayal didn't happen on a battlefield. It happened in the penthouse suite of the Sterling Tower, overlooking a Manhattan skyline I had essentially bought for him. To us, Vance said, his smile as perfect and hollow as a lab-grown diamond. I took a drink. The rich, smoky oak of the Macallan 25 was instantly overwhelmed by a sharp, metallic burn. It wasn't just a bad batch. It was a synthetic potassium chloride compound, a rare black market designer toxin formulated to induce massive, catastrophic cardiac arrest while leaving absolutely no trace in a toxicology report. My glass shattered against the floor. I collapsed, my knees hitting the Persian rug with a dull thud. My lungs seized. The pain was absolute. A white-hot fire tearing through my veins, suffocating me from the inside out. But the physical agony paled in comparison to the shock that shattered my reality. I looked up, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Vance stood by the window. He didn't rush to my side. He didn't pull out his phone to call 911. He simply took a slow, deliberate sip of his scotch, watching me drown in my own blood with the detached, analytical interest. "You really should have seen this coming, Adrian," Vance said, his voice smooth, practiced, and entirely devoid of warmth. "For a tactical genius, you have a catastrophic blind spot for sentimentality. You actually believed we were equals? That I loved you? Don't be absurd. You were useful. Nothing more." I tried to speak, but only a wet, bubbling gasp escaped my lips. Dark blood stained the collar of my white shirt. Vance crouched down, careful to keep the toes of his Oxford shoes out of the expanding pool of my blood. "I couldn't let you live. We ring the bell at the stock exchange tomorrow morning. The IPO is expected to open at $200 a share. Investors don't like whispers that the great Vance Sterling is just a puppet, propped up by his assistant. You built my throne, Adrian, but a king can't have a shadow that knows how to steal his crown. You own 50% of the intellectual property in my secure servers. I needed those shares back." I coughed violently, my vision fraying at the edges. I had refused to sign the blanket NDA and the IP transfer agreements last week because I thought we were getting married. I thought we were partners. "Besides," Vance continued, standing up and casually brushing a microscopic piece of lint off his tailored suit, "a CEO of my stature needs a wife with political leverage. I'm marrying Eleanor Hastings on the 14th. Her father is the chairman of the Senate Defense Committee. That marriage guarantees me billions in federal defense contracts. I simply cannot have my dirty little secret throwing a tantrum and leaking my source code to the press." The realization hit me harder than the toxin stopping my heart. I was a stepping stone, a human ladder he had climbed, and was now kicking away. Vance reached into his coat and pulled out a rusted antique pocket watch. The cheap pawnshop gift I had given him when we had nothing but ambition. He dropped it at my feet. The casing struck the floor with a hollow clang and slid toward my face like discarded scrap. "The paramedics will be here in 10 minutes, Vance said, turning his back on me and walking toward the private elevator. "They'll rule it an undetected heart defect. It's a tragedy, really. The board will love the sympathy angle. Thank you for the empire, Adrian." The door slid shut. In the suffocating silence of the penthouse, I lay dying on the floor of the empire I had built with my own blood, sweat, and intellect. I didn't feel fear. As the darkness closed in, I felt a profound oceanic rage, a cold, absolute fury at my own pathetic stupidity. I had weaponized my genius to elevate a narcissist. I had handed him the blade he used to slit my throat. If I had one more chance, I thought, my vision narrowing to a single point of light, I wouldn't just leave him. I would unmake him. I would take every dollar, every patent, every ounce of his pride, and I would burn it to ash. As my heart gave its final agonizing beat, my blood seeped into the rusted gears of the antique pocket watch. The world didn't fade to black. It fractured. Reality shattered like a mirror, and I was pulled violently backward through a crushing, deafening void. Gasp. I shot upward, lungs expanding violently as I sucked in clean, air-conditioned air. My hands flew to my throat, expecting ruin. Instead, my fingers met smooth, unblemished skin. I was in a king-sized bed in a pristine penthouse. My bedroom. My eyes darted across the room, locking onto the digital clock on the nightstand. October 14th, 2021. 7 a.m. Exactly 5 years before the night I died. My legs gave out the moment I tried to stand. I slumped against the wall, pulling my knees to my chest as a violent panic attack ripped through me. My body trembled with phantom trauma. I could still taste the metallic burn of the poisoned scotch on my tongue. I could still feel the excruciating tightness in my chest. I reached for a glass of water on the nightstand, but my hand shook so violently that I knocked it over. It wasn't a dream. It couldn't be a dream. My eidetic memory held thousands of hours of future events, stock market fluctuations, federal interest rate hikes, and encrypted passwords that hadn't even been generated yet. Somehow, the universe had blinked. I had regressed. I sat on that floor for exactly 10 minutes. I allowed myself those 10 minutes of weakness. I let the tears fall. I let my lungs heave. I let the ghost of the man who loved Vance Sterling grieve his own murder. Then, I forced the trauma into a heavy iron box inside my mind, and I locked it. When the digital clock ticked to 7:11 a.m., the trembling stopped. A crystalline, terrifying clarity settled over my mind. The Adrian who craved Vance's affection, the Adrian who desperately wanted to be loved, had died on that Persian rug. The man who stood up from the shattered glass was a ghost, armed with 5 years of absolute future knowledge, fueled by a spite bordering. I walked into the living room. Sitting on the coffee table was a stack of legal documents, the exclusivity contract and the IP transfer agreement. Today was the day I originally signed my life away. Vance had taken me to dinner last night, claiming this was just a formality for the investors. In my past life, blinded by trust, I had signed it without reading the fine print. I picked up the contract and tore it in half, then into quarters. I watched the pieces fall to the rug like something already buried. I walked to my desk and pulled out a black leather tactical duffel bag. I packed my heavily encrypted laptop and 3 solid-state hard drives. On those drives, I began to furiously type and compile every piece of blackmail, every hidden offshore account, every illegal bribe, and every proprietary algorithm I had mapped out for the syndicate in the future. My phone buzzed on the desk. A text from Vance. Vance, 7:25 a.m. Morning, handsome. Can't wait for you to sign those papers and bring them to the office. Big day today. Love you. The bait on a steel trap. I stared at the screen, feeling a cold smile stretch across my face. I didn't reply. I blocked his number, wiped the phone's GPS tracking protocols, and tossed the silver watch he had given me for my birthday onto the pile of shredded contracts. By 7:30 a.m., I was out the door. To unmake a king, you don't fight fair. You ally with a god. Roman Vanguard, CEO of Vanguard Corporation, the undisputed apex predator of the global tech and defense sector. While Vance relied entirely on my intellect to stay afloat, Roman ruled his empire through absolute, terrifying supremacy. He was old money mixed with ruthless modern warfare. He was a man so fiercely private. He had a strict, psychologically ingrained aversion to physical contact, a 5-foot rule enforced by armed private military contractors. He was Vance Sterling's absolute worst nightmare. The Vanguard Tower loomed over the financial district like a spear of black glass and steel. 120 floors of state-of-the-art paranoia. I arrived at the underground garage at 8:30 a.m. In my past life, Vanguard security had been the only system I couldn't penetrate remotely. Not because it was flawless, but because it was disciplined. No lazy patches, no unsecured ports, no amateur mistakes. So I didn't hack it. 3 years ago, during a vendor audit, I had quietly buried a dormant maintenance credential inside their access management system. It was legitimate, authorized, forgotten. This morning, I used it. The private executive gate recognized the signal from my phone and lifted without protest. No alarms, no flashing lights. I stepped into the VIP elevator. The retinal scanner glowed red for a fraction of a second, then switched to maintenance override. The credential was still alive. 3, 2, 1, green. I pressed 120. As the elevator rose, smooth and silent, my pulse remained steady. You cannot intimidate a man who has already died. The doors opened at exactly 8:45 a.m. The hallway beyond was minimalist and reinforced. Armored glass, discreet cameras, controlled lighting. The security desk sat temporarily empty. Shift rotation. 60 seconds. A blind spot I had memorized 5 years ago. I walked to the double obsidian doors of the CEO's office. I didn't knock. I simply pushed them open. The ambient pressure in the room was immense, suffocating weight of extreme wealth and unyielding authority. Standing behind a massive desk of polished slate was Roman Vanguard. He was devastating. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a bespoke midnight navy suit. His eyes were piercing silver, sharp with cold, aggressive calculation. He radiated a quiet, lethal danger. Intriguing. Roman's baritone voice vibrated through the quiet room. He didn't flinch. He simply evaluated me. No alarms, no perimeter warnings, and you bypassed a biometric lock that cost me $40 million to install. Who are you? Roman's gaze sharpened. He didn't just see an intruder. He analyzed the way I stood. Perfectly balanced, hands out of my pockets, eyes entirely devoid of the career-ending fear that usually paralyzed men when they entered this room. From the shadows near the corner of the office, Marcus, Roman's head of corporate security, stepped forward, his hand resting casually but firmly on the grip of a holstered firearm beneath his jacket. "Sir, I'll dispose of this corporate rat," Marcus growled, moving to intercept me. I ignored Marcus entirely, keeping my eyes locked on Roman. "My name is Adrian," I stated, my voice echoing with absolute icy confidence. "I am the chief tactical architect of the Sterling Syndicate, and I am here to offer you a trade." Roman tilted his head slightly. He didn't move from his desk. He maintained his strict physical distance, his personal boundaries absolute. "Vance Sterling's little shadow," Roman mused. "I know who you are, Adrian. The ghostwriter of Vance's empire. What could a secretary from a rival firm possibly trade with me that I couldn't take by force? I am offering you Vance Sterling's head on a silver platter," I said, taking exactly one step forward. Marcus tensed, but Roman raised a single finger, silently commanding his security chief to stand down. And as an appetizer, I reached into my pocket, using slow, deliberate movements. I tossed a flash drive onto the slate coffee table between us. In that drive are the encrypted offshore routing numbers and falsified manifests used to hijack Vanguard microchip shipments for the last 8 months, I said. You've lost $3 billion in proprietary assets to the black market. Roman's expression remained unreadable, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. You claim to know who is leaking my shipping routes? I don't claim. I know. I slowly turned my head to look at the man standing in the corner. It's Marcus. Absolute silence fell over the office. Marcus let out a harsh, dismissive laugh, but my trained eyes caught the micro-expression of sheer, unadulterated panic that flashed across his face. "This is absurd," Marcus spat, drawing his weapon and aiming it at my chest. "He's a corporate spy, Mr. Vanguard. He's trying to sow division. Let me put a bullet in his skull." Roman kept his eyes locked on me. He didn't look at the gun. He didn't look at Marcus. He was measuring my pulse, looking for a bead of sweat, a twitch of the eye. He found nothing but a man who had already seen the end of the world. "You look like a man with nothing left to lose, Adrian," Roman said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "If you are lying, I won't just kill you. I will tie you in so much litigation and debt that your grandchildren will be born bankrupt. I will dismantle your life until you beg for a bullet." "Plug it in," I challenged, holding his gaze. "Read the data." Roman didn't plug it in. Instead, he reached under his desk. Marcus realized in a fraction of a second that the game was up. If Roman read the drive, he was a dead man. With a roar of desperate rage, Marcus pivoted his weapon away from me and aimed it toward Roman's chest. "Don't move!" Marcus shouted. Roman didn't even blink. He had pressed a silent trigger. Before Marcus could pull his own, a hidden panel in the ceiling directly above him dropped. Two of Vanguard's elite silent private military contractors dropped into the room. It was over in 2 seconds. A tactical baton shattered Marcus's wrist, the gun clattered to the floor, and a heavy combat boot slammed Marcus face first into the tiles. Roman stepped out from behind his desk, stopping exactly 5 feet away from me, the boundary line. He stood there, a towering monolith of power, observing me. "Take the trash out," Roman ordered his men, never taking his eyes off me. "And freeze his accounts." The guards dragged a sobbing Marcus out of the office. The heavy doors clicked shut. We were alone. "The data is verified by the simple fact that my head of security just tried to shoot me," Roman said, his tone conversational, but laced with a terrifying edge. "You just saved me $3 billion, Adrian, but you didn't risk your life breaking into my tower for a finder's fee. What do you really want?" "I want a contract," I said, refusing to back down from his imposing height. "An ironclad, mutually beneficial partnership. I will hand you the entirety of the Sterling Syndicate's market share over the next 6 months. I will bleed Vance dry. I know every patent he's going to file, every startup he's going to buy, and every politician he's going to bribe. I want your financial backing to execute the hostile takeovers, and in return, I want protection." Roman's eyes narrowed slightly. "Protection from what?" "From Vance. From his lawyers, his fixers, and his desperation." I took a deep breath. "I want a fake relationship. I want the world and Vance to believe that his brilliant ghost architect didn't just quit. I want him to believe I left him for the most powerful man in the city. I want him humiliated, paranoid, and utterly paralyzed by the optics." Roman stared at me. For a long moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the city far below. Then Roman Vanguard chuckled. It was a dark, predatory sound. "Move into my estate? Pretend to be my partner?" Roman crossed his arms. "You have a reputation for being brilliant, Adrian, but this is arrogant even for you. You think you can walk into my fortress, drop a flash drive, and demand I play the role of your jealous billionaire boyfriend? I don't let people into my life, and I certainly don't let people touch me." "I don't need to touch you, Roman, and I'm certainly not in love with you," I said smoothly. "I just need you to stand beside me in front of the cameras and smile. If you're too afraid of the media circus, or too cowardly to take a calculated risk, tell me now. I'll find another billionaire to be my weapon. I've got a narcissist to teach a lesson in betrayal." Roman's eyes flared with a dark, intense amusement. The sheer audacity of my threat had caught him off guard. "Arrogant," Roman murmured, stepping 1 foot closer. The boundary was shrinking. I like a weapon that thinks it swings itself. But before I sign my name to a scandal, you need to give me one reason to believe you are the oracle you claim to be, and not just a clever corporate spy who got lucky with Marcus. I glanced at the Rolex on Roman's wrist. The second hand was sweeping toward the 12. I see that in exactly 10 seconds, I said, walking toward the window to stand beside him. The Federal Securities and Exchange Commission is going to conduct an unannounced, no-knock raid on the Federal Bank of Manhattan. Roman's jaw tightened. Impossible. The federal bank holds the accounts of half the Senate. The SEC wouldn't dare raid them without a month of subpoenas. My inside contacts would have warned me. 5, 4, 3... I counted aloud, my voice perfectly steady, staring down at the streets of the financial district. Adrian, Roman's voice was a deep, rumbling warning. If those streets remain quiet, 2, 1. At exactly 9 a.m., the street below exploded into organized chaos. A fleet of unmarked black SUVs swarmed the federal bank's entrance. Dozens of agents in FBI and SEC tactical vests poured out, smashing the revolving doors as they stormed the lobby. Sirens screamed through the morning air, echoing off the skyscrapers. Roman's private terminal on his desk instantly lit up with flashing red alerts. News networks were breaking into their live broadcasts. The global markets were already starting to spasm. I didn't flinch at the chaos. I just looked up at Roman. The untouchable CEO stood frozen, eyes locked on the impossible raid 2 miles away. A strike no one had predicted, a strike that would shift the balance of power across the country. Slowly, Roman turned his head to look at me. The calculated indifference in his gaze was gone. He stepped forward, closing the 5-foot gap. He leaned down, face inches from mine, his presence dark and terrifying. "How did you know the bank raid was coming, Adrian?" Roman's voice cut through the tension. "That doesn't matter now," I replied, calm and deadly. "I've died once. I know enough. Do we have a deal?" "We have a deal," Roman whispered, his breath ghosting over my skin. "If you can see this before it happens, I want to see what you can do to a king. You have your contract, but understand this, you belong to Vanguard now." Sirens screamed below. The Empire was officially at war. For the first time in my second life, I felt the weight of what was coming. Roman walked back to his massive slate desk, picked up a Montblanc pen, and signed the bottom of the non-disclosure and protection agreement I had laid out. "The fake relationship begins tonight," Roman said, his baritone voice strictly business. "There is a charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The tech sector, federal regulators, and the press will be there. Vance Sterling will be there, parading Eleanor Hastings around to secure her father's political backing for his IPO. We will arrive together. We will let the cameras do the talking." Vance is going to lose his mind when he realizes his ghost architect didn't just walk out, but walked into the arms of his biggest rival, I replied, packing my encrypted drives back into my duffel bag. Roman looked up from the paperwork, his gaze sharp and calculating. "He won't just lose his mind, Adrian. He will retaliate. Vance is a cornered animal who is about to lose a $1 billion valuation. My security detail will transport you to my private estate in the Hamptons. It is a fortress. You don't take a step outside without my men. Do you understand?" "I'm not afraid of his lawyers, Roman." "I'm not talking about his lawyers," Roman said coldly. "Men who stand to lose billions don't send cease and desists. They send fixers. You are under my shield now. My security protocols are absolute. We move in 1 hour." The move-in was a blur of high-speed, military-grade logistics. Roman's private estate wasn't a home. It was a brutalist masterpiece of black stone, reinforced glass, and hyper-paranoid security systems carved into the cliffs of the coastline. As the armored SUV pulled through the final steel gate, my phone, which I had routed through a burner proxy server, vibrated. It had been exactly 3 hours since I left Vance's penthouse. "Vance, 10:15 a.m. "Adrian, security says you didn't check in at the office. Where are you?" The press is waiting for the IPO preliminary announcement. Vance, 10:45 a.m. Adrian, this isn't funny. You have the master encryption keys. Pick up the phone. Vance, 11:30 a.m. I'm at your apartment. Why are the contracts shredded on your floor? What the hell did you do? Answer me. I stared at the glowing screen. In my past life, a single text like that would have sent me into a blind panic. I would have rushed to apologize, desperate to fix his world and earn his hollow praise. Now, I just watched the text bubbles pop up with a detached interest. I powered the phone down completely. I didn't sleep that afternoon. I spent the hours in Roman's subterranean server room, my fingers flying across the keys of my tactical laptop. The Oracle lie had to be maintained with hard data and ruthless execution. In my first life, Vance had acquired a company called Blue Horizon on October 15th. It was a failing startup that held the mining rights to a seemingly worthless stretch of land in Nevada. Vance bought it for $10 million. 3 months later, a massive unmapped vein of lithium was discovered under that land, perfectly timed with the syndicate's new battery patents. That land turned the Sterling Syndicate from a wealthy company into a global monopoly. Blue Horizon was the foundation of his throne, and I was going to steal it. By 4 p.m., I had hacked into the Nevada Land Registry to map the exact coordinates. By 5 p.m., I had drafted an aggressive, hostile buyout structure. I didn't bid against Vance. I bypassed the public auction entirely, contacting Blue Horizon's desperate board of directors directly and offering them $80 million in cash from Vanguard's secondary slush fund. A drop in the bucket for Roman, but an insurmountable wall for Vance's current liquid assets. By 6 p.m., the digital ink was dry. Blue Horizon belonged to Vanguard. When I finally stood up from the monitors, I wasn't tired. I was electrified. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was a sea of power, expensive jewelry, and fake smiles. Every major player in the tech and defense world was there, sipping champagne under the vaulted ceilings of the Egyptian wing. I stood in the VIP cloakroom, adjusting the cuffs of the suit Roman had provided. For the first time in 7 years, I didn't look like an overworked, underslept assistant. I looked like a threat. "You're shaking," a low voice rumbled from the doorway. I turned. Roman stood there, dressed in a flawless black tuxedo. He didn't cross the threshold. He maintained his strict psychological distance. His sharp eyes were locked onto my trembling fingers. "It's just adrenaline," I lied, gripping the edge of the marble counter. Roman's expression hardened. "Don't lie to me, Adrian. Your breathing is shallow. Your pulse is visible in your neck. You're having a trauma response." My breath hitched. "I'm fine. I remember what he did, even though it hasn't happened yet. I remember the feeling of my heart stopping. Winning the buyout today isn't enough. I need to see the look on his face when his world falls apart." Roman didn't offer platitudes or pity. True to his nature, he didn't step forward to offer comfort. Instead, his voice dropped to a low, commanding frequency. "Look at me," he ordered. I looked up, meeting his intense, unyielding gaze. "You are not the man who died on that rug," Roman said, his words striking like a hammer. "You are the architect of his ruin. When we walk out there, Vance is going to try to reclaim you. He'll use guilt. He'll use threats. If you waver for a single second, I will drop the contract and leave you to the wolves. But if you stand tall, I will be the shield he breaks his teeth on. Breathe." I took a deep, shuddering breath. The panic attack receded, replaced by the cold, calculated fury that had brought me back from the dead. "I won't waver," I said, stepping away from the counter. "Good," Roman replied, turning toward the door. "Let's go make a scene." The gala floor was buzzing with quiet conversations about the morning's SEC raid. In the center of the room, surrounded by a circle of senators and hedge fund managers, stood Vance Sterling. He looked stressed, His usually perfect smile was tight, eyes flicking toward the entrance every few seconds. Beside him, Eleanor Hastings stood, beautiful, vacant, a shield for his political ambitions. In my previous life, I wouldn't have noticed. My naive mind would have called it business. The room fell silent. The massive oak doors swung open, and the press pool's flashbulbs erupted like strobe lights beyond the velvet ropes. Roman walked into the room, and I was walking directly beside him. The contrast was a physical blow to everyone in attendance. The notoriously isolated, untouchable CEO of Vanguard, a man who never brought a +1, who never allowed anyone within 5 feet of him, was walking shoulder to shoulder with a man. And not just any man. The loyal, invisible shadow of his greatest rival. The whispers started instantly, a low hiss of scandal and shock rippling through the crowd. Vance's head snapped toward us. I watched the blood drain from his face in real time. He gripped his champagne flute so hard I thought the crystal would snap. "Adrian?" Vance's voice was a choked, incredulous whisper that carried through the suddenly quiet room. Roman didn't stop. He walked with the heavy, undeniable authority, leading me straight toward the center of the floor, directly into Vance's personal space. The senators and executives scurried out of Roman's path like frightened staff. "Sterling," Roman said, his voice booming with cold, professional amusement. "I don't believe you've officially met my partner." The word partner hit the room like a bomb. Vance's eyes bulged. He looked at me, then at Roman, then back to me, his meticulously crafted public mask cracking down the middle. "Adrian, what is this? What kind of sick joke is this? You left the apartment. You shredded the documents. I've been calling you all day." "I was busy, Vance," I said, my voice smooth. I stood my ground, feeling the solid, terrifying presence of Roman standing just inches beside me. I realized I had outgrown the syndicate and your limited vision. Limited vision. Vance stepped forward, his face turning a blotchy, ugly red, completely forgetting the senators watching him. "I made you. Everything you have, I gave you. You're just a secretary. You're nothing without my name on your paychecks." "Watch your tone, Sterling," Roman rumbled, the sheer authority in his voice forcing Vance to freeze in his tracks. "You're speaking to Vanguard personnel now. Keep your voice down, or my security will escort you out of the building." Vance flinched. He looked at Eleanor, who was staring at me with a mix of confusion and deep, aristocratic embarrassment. "Adrian, talk to me," Vance pleaded, suddenly shifting gears into that manipulative, soft tone he used to use behind closed doors. The tone that used to make me melt. "Whatever I did, whatever you think happened, we can fix it. Come home." "There was never a home, Vance," I said, locking eyes with him. "I'm just your amused toy." I pulled my phone from my pocket and tapped the screen, bringing up a PDF document. I held it up so Vance could read the header. "Check your email, Vance. The Nevada Land Registry just finalized the transfer of the Blue Horizon mining sector." Vance pulled his phone out with trembling hands. As he read the notification from his acquisition team, his face went from red to a sickly pale gray. "Vanguard? Bought it?" Vance whispered, his voice cracking. "For 80 million? How did you know I was targeting that company? That was encrypted on my private server. It was a closed-door negotiation." "The encryption was mine, Vance," I said, a cold smile finally spreading across my lips. "I wrote the code. Did you really think I wouldn't keep the back door open?" Vance looked like he was going to puke. Blue Horizon was the anchor of his IPO pitch. Without it, the Sterling Syndicate's battery division was nothing but debt and broken promises. You traitor," Vance hissed, his voice trembling with a mix of rage and genuine panic. "I'll sue you for everything you're worth. I'll have you blacklisted from the industry. You're under a lifetime NDA." "Check the shredded paper on my apartment floor, Vance," I replied, my voice echoing in the quiet room. The NDA was never signed. Neither was the exclusivity contract. I'm a free agent, and I've chosen the winning side. Roman stepped forward, seamlessly taking control of the narrative. He addressed the circle of senators and investors who were eagerly absorbing the drama. I believe we're done here, Roman announced. The Sterling Syndicate is no longer a rival of Vanguard Corporation. As of tomorrow morning, it is a distressed asset. Enjoy your evening, Sterling. It's the last one you'll have as a billionaire. Roman turned, gesturing for me to follow. We walked away, leaving Vance Sterling standing in the center of the gala, publicly humiliated, financially outmaneuvered, and staring at the ruins of his reputation. We were halfway across the private parking garage when the adrenaline finally began to crash, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. I leaned against the side of Roman's armored SUV, letting out a long, shaky exhale. I had won the first round. I had drawn first blood. The ghost of the poison still lingered in my mind, a reminder of his betrayal. I never wanted it to end this way. You executed that perfectly, Roman said, standing a few feet away, his hands in his pockets. It's not over, I said. He's going to panic. When the market opens tomorrow, his investors are going to demand answers about Blue Horizon. He's going to get desperate. Let him, Roman said. I looked up at him. The imposing, untouchable billionaire was bathed in the harsh fluorescent lights of the garage. He hadn't broken his rule. He hadn't touched me once all night, but he had stood behind me. He had become the wall at my back. Thank you, I said quietly, for playing along. Roman's jaw tightened. I don't play, Adrian, I invest, and right now you are the most valuable asset I possess. He opened the door to the SUV, gesturing for me to get in. We arrived back at the Vanguard estate just before midnight. But as we walked into the main foyer, Roman's head of cybersecurity was waiting for us. He looked pale, holding a decrypted tablet. Mr. Vanguard, the analyst said, his voice tense. We just intercepted a deep web communication routed through the syndicate's servers. A smear campaign? Roman asked, his voice flat. No, sir. A wire transfer, $5 million, routed to a private military contractor operating out of Eastern Europe, sir. The analyst turned the tablet around so we could see the screen. It was a surveillance photo of me, taken through the window of my apartment just hours before I regressed. Across the photo, a single line of text was written in Russian. Target. Adrian, do not make it quick. The room went deathly silent. Vance wasn't sending lawyers. He wasn't playing corporate games. The sociopath who had poisoned me in my first life was fully awake in this one. He'd skipped the boardroom and gone straight for a hit squad. Roman stared at the tablet. For a long, terrifying moment, he didn't say a word. The air in the room grew heavy with a sudden, suffocating promise of violence. He turned to look at me. The cold, corporate calculation in his gaze was gone, replaced by something much darker. The corporate war was no longer just about stock prices and bruised egos. Vance Sterling had crossed the line from white-collar fraud to first-degree murder. My heart hammered against my ribs, loud in the silent foyer of the Vanguard estate. Vance couldn't beat my intellect in the boardroom, so he had bypassed the game entirely. Mr. Vanguard, the cybersecurity analyst whispered, breaking the heavy silence. Should we contact the FBI? This is a conspiracy to commit murder. No. Roman's voice was a low, terrifying vibration that seemed to drop the temperature of the room. Vance would bury the evidence before they even drafted the subpoena. Roman turned to me. The billionaire CEO was gone. In his place stood a man who controlled one of the largest private military contracting firms on the planet. Do you know where he routed the money from, Adrian? Roman asked, his voice dead calm. The syndicate's legitimate accounts are audited weekly, I said, my voice steadying. He couldn't use company money for a hit squad. He's using Project Chimera. Roman's brow furrowed. Chimera, A shell corporation? His personal slush fund, I explained, stepping closer to the tactical monitors. In my past life, I discovered it too late. It's an illegal, off-the-books, where Vance hides embezzled investor capital and bribes. But it doesn't exist on the cloud. Vance is paranoid about hackers. The Chimera log is stored on a physical, air-gapped server. Cold storage, Roman murmured, instantly understanding the logistics. Where? The Aegis Trust Data Center, I said. 3 floors beneath the financial district. A reinforced bunker for billionaire tax evaders. If we can access that server and copy the Chimera log, we won't just prove the hit squad. We'll have evidence of massive SEC violations, wire fraud, and embezzlement. The silver bullet. If that goes public, Vance won't just lose his IPO tomorrow. He'll rot in federal prison for the rest of his life. Roman stared at me, the pure, ruthless calculation in his eyes matching my own. Aegis Trust employs armed mercenaries, Roman stated. And if Vance just wired $5 million to a hit squad, they might already be in the city. If we walk into that data center, it won't be a corporate negotiation. It will be a breach. I know the system, I said, meeting his gaze without a fraction of hesitation. I can bypass the biometric locks on the server room in 60 seconds, but I need you to get me to the door. Roman didn't smile, but a dark, terrifying light flared in his eyes. He turned to his security chief. Mobilize Delta Team, Roman ordered. Suppressed weapons, tactical body armor. Bring the armored SUV to the front. We are hitting the Aegis Vault in 20 minutes. The ride to the financial district was suffocatingly tense. I sat in the back of the tactical SUV, laptop open, running decryption algorithms in the dark. Beside me, Roman sat in a black Kevlar-weave tactical vest. He hadn't spoken since we left the estate, but he was watching me. He watched the way my fingers flew across the keyboard. He watched the rigid, defensive posture of my shoulders. And he watched the slight, almost imperceptible tremor in my left hand. Drink this, Roman said suddenly. He slid a small silver thermos across the leather seat. I glanced at it. It's just water, Adrian, Roman said, his tone devoid of its usual harshness. Your heart rate has been elevated for 40 minutes. You're dehydrating. I picked up the thermos. As I unscrewed the cap, my hand gave a sudden, violent shake, spilling a few drops of water onto me. The trauma of the poison was a parasite, constantly waiting for a moment of high stress to remind me of the night I died. Before I could bring the thermos to my lips, Roman moved. For the first time since I had met the untouchable CEO, Roman Vanguard deliberately broke his own 5-foot rule. His hand reached across the console and covered mine. The touch was electric. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. This was a man whose psychological aversion to touch was legendary. But his grip on my shaking hand was firm, grounding, and incredibly gentle. You're acting like a machine, Adrian, Roman murmured, his thumb slowly brushing over my knuckles. But your body is still back on that rug in the penthouse. You're expecting a bullet in the dark. I couldn't look away from his hand covering mine. He killed me once, Roman. Even with all my planning, the sheer reality that he is actively hunting me again. It's suffocating. Roman leaned closer, his physical presence overwhelming. He didn't let go of my hand. He is not hunting you, Roman said, his voice a low, absolute vow. He is hunting a ghost, but you are sitting next to a vanguard, Adrian. No one touches what belongs to me. Let him send his hitmen. I will bury them under the foundation of his dying company. He slowly released my hand as the driver's voice crackled over the intercom. 2 minutes to the Aegis drop zone, sir. Perimeter is dark. The Aegis Trust Data Center was a fortress of concrete and steel, hidden beneath a nondescript office building. Roman's Delta team moved with terrifying efficiency. They disabled the external security cameras with localized EMP jammers and bypassed the loading dock doors before the night guards even knew we were there. Roman and I moved through the dark subterranean corridors, flanked by two heavily armed contractors. The air grew freezing cold the deeper we went, the massive cooling units required for the servers humming loudly in the walls. We reached sub-level 3, the cold storage vault. At the end of the hallway was a massive, reinforced steel door secured by a heavy biometric keypad. "Go," Roman whispered, taking up a defensive position by the corridor intersection, his hand resting on the grip of a suppressed sidearm at his hip. I dropped to my knees in front of the door, plugging my tablet directly into the keypad's maintenance port. My fingers flew. "The firewall is aggressive," I muttered, teeth chattering slightly from the freezing air. "I need to spoof the server's internal clock to think it's a scheduled maintenance window, or it will wipe the drives." "How long?" Roman asked, his eyes scanning the dark hallway. 60 seconds. 40 seconds. 30 seconds. "Got it," I breathed, hitting the final command. The heavy steel door gave a loud mechanical thunk and swung inward. The server room was pitch black, save for the blinking blue and green lights of the massive data towers. I stepped inside, pulling out a solid-state drive to copy the Chimera log. "Adrian, wait!" Roman's voice barked from the hallway, but it was too late. As I stepped past the threshold, the shadows in the corner of the server room moved. Vance hadn't just wired the money. The hit squad was already here. His paranoia had tipped them off. They knew the cold storage log was his only weak point, and that I would exploit it. The ambush was waiting. A massive figure in black tactical gear lunged from the darkness between the servers. The glint of a combat knife flashed in the blue light, aimed directly at my throat. I scrambled backward, slipping on the polished floor. The blade slashed through the air, inches from my face. Before the assassin could swing again, Roman was there. He didn't just intervene. He collided with the assassin like a freight train. Roman's sheer physical power was staggering. He grabbed the man's knife arm, twisting it with a sickening crack that echoed over the hum of the servers. The assassin grunted, dropping the blade, and swung a heavy left hook at Roman's jaw. Roman dodged it effortlessly, driving his knee into the man's ribs before throwing him brutally against the steel server rack. The impact dented the metal casing. The assassin crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Gunfire erupted in the hallway outside. Delta Team had engaged 2 more shooters. "Get the data!" Roman roared over the deafening cracks of suppressed gunfire, drawing his weapon and providing cover fire from the doorway. I scrambled to the master terminal. My hands were slick with cold sweat. I jammed the drive into the USB port and initiated the transfer. Copying 20%, 50%. The sound of bullets impacting concrete and steel was deafening. I was breathing in short, jagged gasps, the trauma screaming at me to run, to hide, to accept the death I had already experienced once. 80%. 100%. Transfer complete. I ripped the drive from the console. I have it. Roman fired 2 rapid shots down the hall, then slammed the heavy steel door shut, engaging the interior deadbolt. "Delta Team?" Roman spoke into his earpiece, his voice dangerously calm despite the chaos. "Status. Hallway is clear, sir. 2 hostiles neutralized. We are holding the perimeter." "Copy that. We are extracting in 2 minutes." Roman turned from the door. He holstered his weapon and looked at me. I was backed against a server rack, clutching the hard drive to my chest like a shield. My knees were buckling. Roman didn't hesitate. He crossed the room in 3 massive strides. He didn't care about his boundaries. He saw a man breaking apart, and he caught the pieces. Roman wrapped his arms around me, pulling my trembling body flush against his Kevlar vest. "Breathe, Adrian," Roman commanded softly, his voice a low rumble vibrating through his chest. "I have you. It's over." I squeezed my eyes shut, my fingers gripping his vest. I could hear his heartbeat, steady, powerful, fearless. I choked out, a single traitorous tear slipping down my cold cheek. "He didn't," Roman interrupted fiercely, his grip tightening. "I told you, you are mine to protect. No one takes you from me, not his hitmen, not his poison, not your memories." We stood there in the freezing server room, bathed in the blue light of the data towers. The fake relationship we had signed on paper was dissolving into the cold air. The protective ferocity Roman was radiating wasn't an act for the cameras. It was real. Roman pulled back just enough to look at my face. His hands moved to cup my jaw, his thumbs gently wiping away the cold sweat from my cheekbones. "Show me the drive," Roman whispered, his eyes locked onto mine. I shakily held up the hard drive. Roman's expression hardened back into the ruthless CEO. "Does it have the Chimera log?" "It has everything," I said, my voice finally finding its steel. "It's the complete unmaking of the Sterling Syndicate." Roman's lips curled into a dark, devastating smile. "Then let's go plan a funeral." We arrived back at the Vanguard estate just as the sun was beginning to rise. I immediately plugged the drive into the secure terminal in Roman's office. As the files decrypted and cascaded across the massive monitors, the true scope of Vance's fraud was laid bare. It wasn't just illegal, it was historic. He had essentially built a multi-billion-dollar house of cards, using the upcoming IPO to pay back the stolen money before anyone noticed it was missing. "If he rings that bell on Wall Street tomorrow, he gets a massive cash injection," I said, scrolling through the damning logs. "He covers his tracks, and the syndicate becomes legally untouchable." Roman stood behind my chair, reading the data over my shoulder. His hand rested casually on the back of my neck, a small, grounding touch that proved the shift in our dynamic was permanent. "Then we don't let him ring the bell," Roman said. Before I could reply, my burner phone rang. The screen flashed with an unknown number. I looked up at Roman. He gave a single, curt nod. I put the phone on speaker. "Adrian." Vance's voice echoed through the office. It was ragged, manic, and dripping with venom. "The Aegis Vault," Vance hissed, breathing heavily. "You broke into my private servers. My men are dead." "They were sloppy, Vance," I replied, my voice dripping with cold disdain. "Just like your accounting. Project Chimera? Really? You couldn't think of a better name for a slush fund?" A sharp intake of breath echoed over the line. "You don't understand what you're holding, Adrian. If you leak those logs, the company burns. Thousands of people lose their jobs. The board will be ruined. Everything we built—" "I built it," I interrupted, my voice sharpening. "You just put your name on the door, and now I'm tearing the building down. You think Roman Vanguard cares about you?" Vance spat, his voice escalating into a desperate shout. "He's using you to acquire my assets for pennies on the dollar. Once he has Blue Horizon and my patents, he'll toss you in the gutter. He's no different from me." Roman leaned down, his face close to me. "Sterling." Roman's deep voice resonated with absolute authority. "I don't need your assets. I already own the world. But I am going to enjoy watching the Federal Bureau of Investigation drag you out of the stock exchange in handcuffs. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a very long day." Roman reached over and hit the end call button. The silence returned to the office. The final battle lines were drawn. I looked up at Roman. He's going to accelerate the IPO. He'll try to ring the bell the second the market opens at 9 a.m. before we can get this data to the SEC. Roman looked down at me, his eyes burning with a quiet, lethal intensity. "Then we deliver it to the SEC in person," Roman said softly. "On the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, with the cameras rolling." He reached out, his knuckles brushing lightly against my cheek. "Get dressed, Adrian. It's time to kill a king." The morning of the Sterling Syndicate IPO didn't bring a sunrise. It brought a funeral shroud. Today, I wasn't the man who died on a Persian rug. I wasn't the ghost architect, hiding in the shadows of a lesser man's ego. I was the executioner. The door of the suite clicked open. Roman walked in. He was dressed for corporate slaughter, a bespoke charcoal black three-piece suit. He walked up behind me. For years, Roman had enforced a strict 5-foot boundary of isolation. But today, he didn't hesitate. He stepped seamlessly into my personal space, his broad chest lightly brushing against my back. He reached around me, his hands gently brushing my fingers aside to adjust my collar himself. The intimacy of the gesture was staggering. The Federal Bureau of Investigation received the copy of decrypted Chimera log at 4 a.m. Roman's low, gravelly baritone vibrated right next to my ear. The director of the SEC has signed the emergency warrants. The trap is set, Adrian. Vance won't go down quietly, I murmured. When he realizes the money isn't there to cover his fraud, he's going to lash out. He's a cornered animal. Roman's hand slid from my collar down to my shoulders, his grip firm, grounding, and fiercely possessive. Let him lash out, Roman rumbled, his eyes meeting mine. He's a cornered animal in a cage I bought, on a stage you built. If he takes a single step toward you today, I will break him in half in front of the cameras, Adrian. I am your shield. Today, you don't just survive, you take his crown. I leaned back slightly, letting the solid, unyielding warmth of Roman's body anchor me. Then let's go to Wall Street. I want to watch his empire burn before the opening bell. The motorcade to the New York Stock Exchange was a display of absolute, terrifying power. 3 matte black armored Vanguard SUVs tore through the damp streets of the financial district, flanked by private security contractors on motorcycles. We arrived at Broad Street just as the media circus was reaching its peak. The front of the NYSE was swarming with reporters, news vans, and financial analysts. The Sterling Syndicate IPO was the largest tech valuation of the decade. Billions of dollars were expected to change hands the moment the clock struck 9. Roman and I didn't take the side entrance. We didn't hide. When the door of our SUV opened, a squad of Vanguard's elite security detail formed a wedge, violently parting the sea of aggressive paparazzi. I stepped out onto the damp pavement, and Roman stepped out right beside me. The flashbulbs erupted like a strobe light. The shouting questions from the press pool merged into a deafening roar. Mr. Vanguard, is it true Vanguard Corporation is orchestrating a hostile takeover of Blue Horizon? Adrian, are the rumors true about your fallout with Vance Sterling? Mr. Vanguard, what is the nature of your relationship with Sterling's former chief architect? Roman didn't answer them. He simply placed his hand on my back, a public, undeniable claim of protection and partnership, and guided me up the stone steps. Inside, the trading floor was a cathedral of capitalism. The massive digital screens wrapped around the room, currently displaying the blue and silver logo of the Sterling Syndicate. The floor was packed with traders, executives, and invited VIPs, all waiting for the main event. Up on the iconic ringing balcony overlooking the floor stood Vance Sterling. He looked immaculate, smiling brightly for the camera crews setting up on the balcony. Beside him stood Eleanor Hastings, looking like a perfectly styled political prop, and her father, Senator Hastings, who was eagerly awaiting the influx of wealth he had been promised. Vance looked down at the floor. His smile froze. From 50 yards away, I felt the exact moment his eyes locked onto mine. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a wax mannequin. He gripped the brass railing of the balcony, his knuckles turning white. He sees us, I whispered to Roman over the low roar of the trading floor. Good, Roman replied coldly. Let the panic set in. We moved toward the VIP staircase. 2 of Vance's private security guards stepped forward to block our path. Excuse me, gentlemen, the lead guard said, puffing out his chest. This area is restricted to syndicate executives and family only. Roman didn't even break his stride. He didn't raise his voice. He simply looked at the guard with a stare so devoid of humanity, so terrifyingly blank, that the man instinctively took a half-step back. I am Roman Vanguard, the CEO stated, his voice a low, lethal hum that cut through the noise of the room. "And this is my partner. If you don't move out of my way in the next 3 seconds, I will personally see to it that you are unemployable in every sector on this continent." 3, 2. The guards looked at each other, their faces pale, and scrambled out of the way. We ascended the stairs, the heavy thud of our footsteps sounding like the ticking of a doomsday clock. When we reached the balcony, the tension was so thick it was suffocating. The network executives and PR managers backed away, sensing the sudden, violent shift in the atmosphere. Vance stepped away from Eleanor, his eyes wide, his chest heaving with barely suppressed panic. His face twisted into an ugly mask of desperation. He leaned in, his voice trembling with a mix of rage and terror. "Adrian, please, the Aegis server, you didn't. Tell me you didn't give the Chimera log to him. You know what that means. If the board finds out the money is gone—" "The board?" I interrupted, a cold, ruthless laugh cutting through the tension. "The board is the least of your problems, Vance. You sent a Russian hit squad to kill me." Eleanor Hastings gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Vance, what is he talking about?" "Shut up, Eleanor," Vance snapped, his polished facade crumbling. He turned to me, eyes bloodshot. "You have no proof. You're bluffing, bitter and jealous because I never loved you, and now you're trying to ruin my moment. I am Vance Sterling. In 5 minutes, I ring that bell, and I become untouchable." "You were never a genius, Vance," I said softly, my voice dripping with absolute pity. "You were just a parasite who found a host, but the host woke up, and I took the cure." I pulled my encrypted phone from my pocket. I wanted the world to see the monster he truly was. I tapped a single command that Roman's cyber team had pre-programmed into the exchange's broadcast server. 8:59 a.m. "Watch the screens, Vance," I whispered. Above the trading floor, the massive, glowing Sterling Syndicate logos suddenly flickered. A loud burst of static echoed through the hall, silencing the hundreds of billionaires below. The screen displayed high-definition images of the Project Chimera logs. Line by line, the evidence of Vance's historic fraud scrolled across the monitors for every financial analyst, reporter, and investor in the world to see. Transfer, $5 million. Private military contractor. Assassination directive, Adrian. Transfer, $20 million. Senator Hastings, unreported campaign contribution. Transfer, $150 million. Embezzled from Sterling Tech R&D pension fund. The hall erupted into absolute pandemonium. Traders were screaming into their phones. Reporters were pointing their cameras at the screens, their jaws unhinged in shock. Senator Hastings stared at the screen, his face turning an ashen gray as his own name appeared next to a $20 million bribe. He looked at Vance with sheer, unadulterated hatred. "You son of a bitch," the senator hissed, grabbing his daughter's arm. "Eleanor, we are leaving. Now, do not say a word to the press." "Wait, Eleanor, please," Vance begged, reaching out for her. But she ripped her arm away and fled down the stairs with her father. The clock struck 9 a.m. The opening bell rang. But no one bought a single share of the Sterling Syndicate. Within 3 seconds of the market opening, the algorithms reacted to the historic fraud data. The syndicate's stock price plummeted from a projected $200 a share to $15, then $8, then $2. Trading halted. The screens flashed in bold red letters. Vance's net worth had evaporated in exactly 12 seconds. "No," Vance whimpered, stumbling backward, his hands gripping his hair. No, this isn't real. It's a hack. It's a deep fake." The heavy brass doors slammed open. Federal agents wearing windbreakers emblazoned with FBI and SEC stormed the platform. "Vance Sterling," the lead FBI agent barked, flashing his badge. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, massive wire fraud, and violations of the Securities Exchange Act. Keep your hands where I can see them. Vance backed against the brass railing. He was hyperventilating, his perfectly styled hair falling into his manic, bloodshot eyes. His empire was dead. His freedom was gone. His mind, unable to process the absolute totality of his destruction, finally snapped. The FBI agents moved quickly, grabbing Vance and pressing him against the balcony wall. They cuffed his wrists behind his back and read him his rights. They hauled Vance to his feet, his empire in ruins. As they led him past, he locked eyes with me one last time. There was no arrogance left, no manipulation. Just the hollow, broken realization that he had dug his own grave the moment he decided I was expendable. "Adrian," Vance choked out, tears of humiliation streaming down his face. I looked at him, feeling absolutely nothing. The phantom trauma, the fear, the ghost of the poison, it all washed away, leaving behind a profound, crystalline peace. "Checkmate, Vance," I said softly. They dragged him out the doors. The flashing cameras of the press pool swallowed him whole. I stood on the balcony, looking out over the chaos of the trading floor. The Sterling Syndicate was dead. The corporate war was over. I had regressed, I had survived, and I had won. I felt a warm hand slide onto the back of my neck. Roman stepped up beside me, overlooking the ruins of our enemy's empire. The cold, ruthless edge of the Vanguard CEO had melted away, replaced by a quiet, fierce pride. "It's done," Roman said, his thumb gently tracing the line of my jaw. "He's gone." I leaned into his touch, closing my eyes and taking my first true free breath in 5 years. It's done. The Sterling Syndicate was nothing more than a cautionary tale in the Wall Street Journal. Vance Sterling was sitting in a maximum security federal detention center, denied bail, awaiting a trial that his court-appointed lawyers had already admitted he would lose. The company's assets had been liquidated, and Vanguard Corporation had acquired the Blue Horizon patents for pennies on the dollar. I was standing on the cedar deck of Roman's private cabin, hidden deep in the snowy peaks of Aspen. The heavy glass door slid open behind me. Roman stepped out onto the deck. He walked up behind me, wrapping his strong arms securely around my waist. I leaned back into his broad chest, letting him pull me flush against him. The man who supposedly hated physical contact now seemed unable to keep his hands off me. It was a silent, beautiful proof that the walls had truly come down. He rested his chin lightly on my shoulder, looking out at the snow-covered mountains. "The Vanguard board just approved your new position. Chief Executive of Acquisitions. The office next to mine is yours." I smiled, turning my head slightly to look at him. "Are you sure you want me that close, Mr. Vanguard? I have a habit of dismantling companies from the inside." Roman's grip tightened possessively around my waist. He turned me around in his arms, his intense, piercing eyes locking onto mine. "You dismantled a fraud, Adrian," Roman whispered. "But you and I, we build empires. And I don't want you in the shadows anymore. I want you ruling right beside me." "A king needs his architect," I murmured, my hands sliding up to rest against his chest, feeling the steady, powerful beat of his heart. "And the architect," Roman replied, leaning down, his breath warm against my lips, "needs to know he is loved, fiercely and without condition. The timeline is sealed. The Sterling Syndicate has been liquidated into the archives of history, and the laws of reality have been rewritten in the Oracle's crimson ink. So tell me, was the regression to your satisfaction? I promised you a strategist who wouldn't just survive, and Adrian just delivered a masterclass in divine retribution. If you found it satisfying to watch the shadow tear down a corporate god, make sure to hit that like button. For the elite few who remained until the final convergence, you are the foundation of my empire. Comment the word sovereign below so I can verify your loyalty in the comments. Subscribe and activate the notification bell. My next MC is already looking at his watch, and frankly, He'll make Adrian's 5-year war look like a momentary distraction. Stay sharp, stay ruthless. I'll see you in the next acquisition. Honestly, you all are my strength. Thank you.